Thank you very much, Ellie. They usually let the oldest guy say the concluding remarks. I thought I could speak for 10 or 12 minutes about the Palestinian Authority and the future of Gaza, specifically why it is inadequate to govern Gaza. More specifically, it won't, can't, and shouldn't govern Gaza. But I would be remiss if I, as an Iran researcher, not make a brief reference to the events of the hour. And as you know, Iran has publicly committed to attack Israel in the coming days or coming weeks. But I think that at this point, keeping track of Iranian media and statements, they seem to be committed to react, and they seem to be determined to revenge the death of Ismail Haniyeh, the political chief of Hamas, who was assassinated in Tehran by God knows whom. And the idea here is to, for them, is not to normalize a situation where Israel is confident enough to assassinate leaders in the heart of Tehran. The issue is that right now the international community is focusing on preventing a regional escalation and a regional war. The only problem is that Israel has already been engulfed in a regional war for 10 months now. So I read also a lot of UN reports and all sorts of statements by international media, and it is very obvious to notice that statements and references to the situation in the Middle East, including that of the European Council last May, focus exclusively on Gaza. And the situation is much, much more wide than a narrow prism called the Gaza Strip. As Baruch mentioned, this is a whole campaign on 7 fronts by the Iranian Axis against Israel. We saw it on April 14th with the 300 plus missiles and drones Iran launched at Israel. We see it in the $700 million per year it budgets with Hezbollah. We see it in the Gaza Strip. The Houthis in Yemen, we just saw the drone exploding in the heart of Tel Aviv, not far from the US consulate, and militias in Iraq, in Syria, Palestinians in Judea and Samaria, like Baruch mentioned, especially Palestinian Islamic Jihad, PIJ, but also Hamas itself. April 14, it was called in Persian Va'adeh Sadek, the true promise, the references to the Quran, and now they are promising to have what they call a Sakhtar Tulanitar Va Ajib Omiztar, which is stronger. You speak Persian, I guess. That's why they smile. A harder, longer, and more decisive response to Israel than what happened on April 14. Otherwise put, last time around, we had a show of force, and now we'll have a use of force. And I think Iran is determined to react now. But what I think we as an IDSF would expect is for the international community to understand the Iranian threat and not just the Gaza theater. I would assume that had Iran declared the construction of a new balcony in Judea and Samaria, we would have an emergency plenary in the United Nations General Security Council. Right now, they are only threatening the destruction of Israel, so the UN, I'm assuming, has more urgent things to do. But this is serious because right now this is the number one threat to the peace and security of the Middle East. I will say before briefly discussing the Palestinian Authority, as Eli mentioned, we have in our research department over 20 dedicated researchers who do this all the time. And we have position papers and research papers on a weekly basis, sometimes on a daily basis. So we'll put forth some of them on your tables, and I would really encourage you through Eli to contact us for personal briefings, to in-person papers, even a Q&A on WhatsApp or an email, because we really are happy to do it. This is really what we're here for, to provide you with these materials. What you're seeing on the screen right now is a picture of a Fatah operative on October 7, and behind him a burning Israeli military jeep. And this is something that the Fatah movement published, not Hamas. You see the yellow scarf? The Hamas is green, right? Fatah is yellow. What they not only stated, they boasted their participation in the October 7 attack. So just to teach you through this image, it really tells it all. What kind of commitment the Palestinian Authority still has to the armed struggle. They may wear suits, and not military uniform, but their goal is the same, and they declare it. Developments from the past week. This is the Philadelphia route, as Amir mentioned. A tunnel that was discovered near Rafah just in the past week, 3 meters high, enough for a military jeep to drive through. Just to show you the extent of tunnels and the need for Israel to continue with military presence along the Philadelphia route, all of the Iranian ammunition that made Hamas armed to its teeth on October 7 did not land from the moon, we assume, but through the Philadelphia route. And Egypt is vehemently denying it, but we know through intelligence, through exposure of at least 22 tunnels and over 200 shafts in the Rafah governorate, that it is only the beginning, scratching the surface here. And the Jordan Valley deliberately making this equivalation, this comparison here with the other Philadelphia route, which is the Jordan Valley, the Israel-Jordan border. Just last week, a major smuggling of at least 75 guns was caught there, but it happens on a weekly basis, arming Palestinians in Judea and Samaria with Iranian weapons to prepare for an all-out scenario. And I think the point of this talk is to examine why we keep falling back on the premises of the past. Let me let you into a secret. Not just officials in the United Nations keep falling to the templates of the past, but also some Israeli generals who are fortunately not member of the IDSF. I was in a TV discussion last week with a former general who said that Israel should leave the Philadelphia route and establish a wall there. And remembering what happened on October 7 when Israel constructed a $3 billion wall underground and above ground, it was crushed with simple tractors and IEDs. I think it is safe to say, especially having seen what happened in the past 2 decades, that without Israeli military presence in the Philadelphia route, there can be no guarantee that Gaza never rearms. There has to be Israeli military presence. It is not in theory, it is in practice. For the past 2 decades, Egypt was in charge of preventing arms from funneling. With bad intention, with good intention, whatever the cause is, the bottom line result is that Egypt could never prevent Gaza from arming to its teeth toward October 7. And this is really dialing back to the Palestinian Authority. It is perceived as a moderate government. In practice, it couldn't be further from the truth. We have the display window and the shop. We have the President Abbas wearing suit and tie, and behind him the real Fatah, the real Palestinian Authority militants on October 7. We have great, amazing-looking annual reports filed to the United Nations, and we have propaganda comparing today's Israeli settlers to Jews in the Holocaust, sort of not giving you legitimacy to do the same thing to us. Really classic anti-Semitic tropes that are used on a daily basis in Palestinian media. But I would argue that the Palestinian Authority cannot govern Gaza for 3 main reasons. First of all, I would argue that it can't, even if it wanted to, and even if we wanted it to. These pictures were not taken 10 years ago. They were taken a few months ago. Actually, these two on October 17, right, a few days after the massacre, where there was a huge rally in Ramallah in support of Hamas and calling for Abbas to resign. In Ramallah, not in Nablus and not in Gaza, in Ramallah, the bastion, if you will, of Fatah rule. The popular support of Hamas among Palestinians is rampant. And as someone who keeps track of Arab media, this is very, very obvious. We see green Hamas flags over here in a demonstration where Fatah PA forces actually opened live ammunition on protesters. Popular support. This is not me saying, this is a Khalil Shkaki PSR think tank, the Palestinian think tank, who regularly publishes quarterly opinion polls among Palestinian society. You are free to look at it on the IDSF website. We surveyed all polls from the past 5 years. Right. All polls from the past 5 years, we compiled them into one nice graph, which shows you the trend. We just took every quarterly report from the past 5 years. What you see is amazing. I mean, if you see in September, that the support for Hamas was, the call for Mahmoud Abbas to resign was 79%, then it was 88%, and even more radicalized ways in the West Bank, Judea and Samaria, 78% to 92%. I know it's a great talking point to say that Hamas does not represent the Palestinian people. We heard it the most public officials say it. Unfortunately, it's not true for anyone who takes a look at the Palestinian media for 4 seconds. 71% of Palestinians in Judea and Samaria, not in Gaza, would rather see Hamas government as opposed to 11% who wants a revitalized Palestinian Authority. 82% of Palestinians in Judea and Samaria are happy about Hamas's conduct. 94% demand Abbas to resign, as we said here. Under any public poll, Hamas crushes in a landslide victory any candidate from Fatah, be it Abbas or Shtaya or Mustafa or any of the candidates. So we really did create a paper tiger here where even if it wanted to, the Palestinian Authority cannot govern its own territory, let alone Gaza. Mahmoud Abbas didn't set foot in Gaza for 2 decades. Not only that, he didn't set foot in Jenin for 2 decades, in Jenin, where he's supposed to be controlling, except 2 visits, one in 2012, if I'm not mistaken, and the other one last year, after the IDF operation there. Fatah, the Palestinian Authority, tried to embark on an operation to crush all militant factions in Jenin last year. It failed miserably. I'll give him 24 hours, but it was much less than that they had to retreat. Abu Mazen, when he visited Jenin, he was not visiting his own territory. He was a guest of local PIJ factions. He was brought in a Jordanian helicopter, landed in Jenin, was escorted by local armed militants, and walked back. He was a guest in their territory. Unbelievable. So he doesn't even control his own territory. Next, I tell you that he won't. Let me let you into a secret. The Palestinian Authority would not want to govern Gaza. They know fairly well that the popular support for Fatah is nearing zero. There are pro-Fatah demonstrations in Gaza, but the overall picture is not in favor of those who wear suit and tie and cuddle up to the Americans and the Israelis, okay, to put it in their language, but those who are fierce about the armed struggle against Zionism, which is Hamas, of course. And I think if you look at this picture, one thing that really caught my eye is the key. The lapel, we usually wear lapels of positive things. What Mahmoud Abbas, the moderate from the Palestinian Authority, wears a lapel of a key. It's not a key to his house in Ramallah, but the houses they allegedly were forced out of in Jaffa, where we are right now, in Tel Aviv, in Haifa, in Acre. 48 territories. It's a very well-known Palestinian symbol. Why it shouldn't govern Gaza? This is Mohammed Shtaya, the former Palestinian prime minister. He's supposed to be a moderate. Let me read out the quote for you. If Abbas wishes to be popular amongst Arabs, he will order his security apparatus to join the war alongside Hamas against Israel. This option is on the table for authorities in Ramallah. Tens of thousands of PA armed militants are on their way to be the next surprise. Our job is to protect the Palestinian people, and we wish to fight against the Zionist enemy. I wouldn't call it a friends or a partners talk. I would call it an enemies talk. And this is coming from the highest levels of Palestinian Authority, as it is having some sort of ties with Israel. A honorary guard honoring Hamas militants who were killed in Judea and Samaria by the Palestinian Authority. That was in December. Just in the past week, we saw Abbas call Khaled Mash'al from Hamas, right? Expressing his condolences for the killing of Haniya in Tehran. Next, we have the ICC and the ICJ. Folks, this is a blatant violation of the Oslo Accords. The PA is violating the Oslo Accords in every single possible way. The ICC admitted the Palestinian Authority as an observant state against any international norms. It even admitted to have created boundaries for the sake of discussion, Judea, Samaria, and Gaza, while the state is not meeting the criteria for any normal state in the world. And it's going to look into allegations as from June 14, 2014. Why specifically this day, June 14, 2014? Because the previous day was the kidnapping of the 3 teenagers by Palestinians that triggered the chain of events that led to the Protective Edge operation. So one day after the kidnapping of 3 Israeli teenagers, then we can look into Israeli crimes. So all of these things combined do not amount to this. Pay for slay. I'm sure you know, we have a whole research about it on our website. We're happy to send it over. For the Palestinian Authority, it pays 8 times as much to be a terrorist than a teacher or an engineer. We have seen a state policy, not a gesture by Mahmoud Abbas, a state policy by the Palestinian Authority to reward terrorists for terrorist activity. Every terrorist knows, and we have the Ministry of Prisoners and Released Prisoners to oversee it in the PA, and we have the Martyr Bureau in the PLO. They pay every single terrorist, Palestinian person who murdered or tried to murder Israelis, a monthly wage as per their conviction. So if someone is in prison for 1 year, they get right around 1,400 shekels. Do the math, it's something like $400. 5th year, you only get 4,000 shekels. 30th year and above, getting 12,000 shekels. It's over $3,700 per month. Any teacher, engineer, doctor can dream about these sums, somehow equivalent to the wage received by the Palestinian head of the Supreme Court. Okay, just for you to realize the priorities here. Per capita, they put forth 80 times more per capita on pay for slay than on health. Okay? In total, they pay right around $370 million every year for Palestinian prisoners, released prisoners, and families of what they call martyrs, Palestinians who were killed in action. $370 million is a lot of money for humanitarian aid, for hospitals. And I would assume that the international community would not ignore, as the European Union tried to do 2 years ago, ignore the content of the curriculum, ignore pay for slay, and continue to funnel money anyway to the Palestinian Authority, but demand accountability. It's not too much to ask. Fayad plan, also in violation of the Oslo Accords. Any construction in Area C should be collaborated with Israel. These are the Oslo Accords that they signed. And speaking about Israeli settlements, those are in blue. I'm assuming you have a hard time to see it because it's very few. Unlike the red, illegal Palestinian construction in Area C. So it is rampant, 86,000 structures of Palestinians around Area C. They are described in UN reports as disadvantaged communities who are driven away from their territory and a lot of demolitions. Nothing could be further from the truth. We see the numbers, we see the maps. Anyone who drives around Judea and Samaria can see rampant illegal construction of Palestinians, and under what they call the Fayad Plan, named after the former Salam Fayyad, the Prime Minister of the Palestinian Authority, as from 2009, 86,000 structures. And incitement. This is Fatah, not Hamas. Fatah calling to recreate October 7 in the West Bank, Judea and Samaria. Calling to recreate it. This is the map of Palestine for them, especially Tel El Rabi', Tel Aviv, where we are right now. So you can see how it is not education for cohabitation or living together side by side, but for war. This is a Fatah senior official. We may see similar scenes in the West Bank. Speaking about October 7, Mahmoud al-Alul, he's the deputy of Mahmoud Abbas, the deputy of the chairman of the Palestinian Authority, praising the October 7 attacks and wishing for them to be recreated in Judea and Samaria. Mahmoud Abbas himself never condemned the attacks. On the other on the other side, the contrary, he accused Israel for causing them. So all of these things put together, I would say that we had kind of a lab experiment in Israel over the past 30 years. We had a lab experiment of giving the keys to Israel's security in the hands of the Palestinian Authority. And military leaders encouraged putting trust in the Palestinian Authority in order for Israel to shift its focus away from running around after terrorists and letting the Palestinian security mechanisms to do the job for it. And we see that there are no magical solutions. There are no magic solutions, and we cannot sort of pave a road that bypasses reality. It was tried. The lab experiment was tried for 30 years. The Palestinian Authority proved itself unwilling and unable to govern and to fight terrorism. On the contrary, it is encouraging and incentivizing it. And so I published an article called Ideal versus Real. Even if ideally Palestinian Authority could govern Gaza right now, realistically it cannot. It cannot even govern its own territory. And now it's time, like Baruch's talk, that we find new innovative solutions to the Palestinians in Gaza, using local communities rather than 94% who call on Abbas to resign, to help them find their way, and to demand a basic condition: any sort of local authority, local government, local entity should outright reject terrorism and not encourage the armed struggle against Jews and Israelis. It is not too much to ask. What we saw in the Palestinian Authority over the past 3 decades as a lab experiment failed, and I think now it's time not to fall back to the templates of the past, but to find new ways to deal with reality on the ground right now. Thank you very much.